The parable of the prodigal son, a soul-searching narrative. There was once a wealthy man with two sons. The younger son, filled with impatience and a desire for independence, came to his father one day with an unexpected and bold request. "Father, give me my share of the inheritance now." It was a shocking demand, almost like wishing his father were already dead. Yet, in his love and understanding, the father agreed, dividing his property and giving the younger son his share. The father was rich in lands, cattle, silver and gold. With the newfound wealth in hand, the younger son quickly gathered his belongings and left for a distant country, his heart set on experiencing all that life had to offer. For a time, he lived extravagantly, indulging in every desire and pleasure he could find, partied lavishly with friends, and stayed at expensive hotels. His money flowed freely, and he became the center of attention, surrounded by those who were drawn to his wealth. But soon, his fortune ran out, and with it, the so-called friends who had been by his side. He found himself alone and destitute, just as a severe famine struck the land. Desperate for survival, he looked for work, but found only the most humiliating job possible: feeding pigs, animals considered unclean by Jewish law. The young man, now humbled and broken, was so hungry that he longed to eat the pods he was feeding the pigs. It was in this pit of despair that he came to his senses. In a moment of deep realization, he thought, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough to eat, while I am here starving to death?" He understood then the gravity of his mistakes, the reckless choices that had brought him to this point. So he resolved to return to his father, confessing, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants." With his heart heavy yet hopeful, the young man set out on the long journey home. He did not expect to be received as a son, but he hoped for mercy, perhaps to be treated as a servant. As he approached home, while still a long way off, his father saw him. The father had never stopped watching for his lost son, his eyes searching the horizon each day, hoping for his return. Overcome with compassion, the father ran to his son, not waiting for an explanation or apology. He threw his arms around him, embracing him with tears of joy. The son, humbled by his father's love, began his prepared confession. "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." But the father interrupted him with a command to his servants. "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." While the house erupted in celebration, the elder brother was in the fields, working diligently as always. When he heard the sounds of music and dancing, he asked a servant what was happening. Learning that his younger brother had returned and that his father had thrown a feast, the elder brother was furious and refused to enter the house. The father, noticing his elder son's absence, came out and pleaded with him. But the elder son, filled with resentment, said, "All these years I have been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him." With a heart full of compassion, the father responded, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Lessons from the parable 1, the boundless love of the Father. This parable paints a vivid picture of God's unconditional love. The Father's open arms symbolize God's grace, ever ready to welcome anyone who repents and returns, no matter how far they've strayed. The fact that the Father runs to embrace the Son reveals God's eagerness to restore broken relationships. No sin is too great for God's forgiveness, and no soul is beyond redemption. Return to the Lord today. 2. True repentance leads to restoration. The younger son's realization of his wrongs and his decision to return home signify the importance of repentance. Genuine repentance is not merely feeling regret, but actively seeking to make things right. The determination to abandon unrighteousness living. The son's humility in being willing to serve as a hired hand shows the true spirit of repentance. one that desires forgiveness, not entitlement. 3. Resentment hinders grace. The elder brother's reaction reveals a different kind of lostness, the bitterness that comes from pride and self-righteousness. While he had stayed home and obeyed, his heart was far from the grace his father demonstrated. This teaches us that faithfulness without love is incomplete, and that we must guard against bitterness, especially when God shows grace to those we think don't deserve it. 4. God's grace is a gift, not a reward. The Father's celebration at the return of the younger son shows that God's grace is not something earned, but given freely. It is a gift of love, not a reward for good behavior. Both the lost sinner and the faithful believer need grace, for it is not human merit, but divine mercy that brings salvation. 5. God's joy in redemption. The celebration at the return of the lost son reflects the joy in heaven over one sinner who repents. It reminds us of the value of every soul and the immeasurable joy God feels when one of his children comes home. The parable of the prodigal son is a powerful story of redemption, grace, and the love of God for all his children. It calls us to examine our own hearts. Are we the prodigal, longing for forgiveness? Are we the elder brother, struggling with bitterness? Or are we called to be like the Father, extending love and grace to all, regardless of their past? It is a soul-searching story that urges us to return to God, to embrace His mercy, and to rejoice in the redemption of others. If this message has blessed you, you can win a soul today for the Lord by hitting the like, share, and subscribe button so that lost soul can watch this video. Thanks for watching.